Your father never told you how the world actually works. Not because he didn't love you, not because he didn't care, but because somewhere between his father and him, the chain broke. The knowledge that men used to pass down, generation to generation, father to son. The dangerous truths about power, violence, hierarchy, and what it actually takes to survive as a man in a world that doesn't care about your feelings. That knowledge stopped being transmitted, and you can feel it. That hollow space where something should be. That sense that you're supposed to know something fundamental, but nobody ever taught you. They didn't forget to teach you. They were systematically prevented from teaching you. And by the end of this, you'll understand exactly what was taken from you, why it was taken, and what you're supposed to do now that you know. This isn't about blaming your father. This is about understanding what was done to an entire generation of men so you can reclaim what was stolen. Go back 3, 4, 5 generations. Your great-great-grandfather. He knew things about the world that you don't. Not opinions, not beliefs. Operational knowledge about how power actually functions and what men actually are. He understood violence. Not theoretically, practically. He knew that the capacity for violence, the ability to do harm when necessary, wasn't something to be ashamed of or suppress. It was the foundation of everything else. Protection, provision, respect, authority. You can be the kindest, most gentle, most generous man in the world. But if you can't access violence when required, you're not safe. You're not respected. You're managed. Previous generations of men understood this instinctively, not because they were more brutal, because they lived closer to the reality that civilization tries to hide. The world is still governed by force. It's just outsourced now, abstracted, but it's still there. Your great-grandfather knew that if someone threatened his family, his property, his dignity, there was a line, and past that line, words stopped and action began. And everyone around him knew he had that line, which meant most people never tested it. That's not toxic masculinity. That's the social contract that kept order for thousands of years. Mutual understanding that escalation has consequences, and some men are willing to pay those consequences. You weren't taught this. You were taught that violence is always wrong, that there's always a peaceful solution, that real strength is walking away. Sometimes that's true. Often it's suicide. They also understood hierarchy in ways you don't. They knew that not all men are equal, not in value, not in capability, not in the deference they command. And they knew this wasn't a moral failing. It was an observation of reality. Some men lead. Some men follow. Some men build. Some men maintain. Some men protect. Some men are protected. And there's no shame in knowing where you fit and operating accordingly. The shame is in pretending the hierarchy doesn't exist while getting crushed by it because you're playing a game you don't believe in. Your ancestors understood that respect isn't given, it's earned or taken. That status isn't about being nice, it's about being formidable. That other men don't follow you because you're likable, they follow you because you're capable, and they benefit from proximity to your capability. None of this is comfortable, but it's true. And they understood women in ways that would get you cancelled for saying out loud today. They knew that women and men want different things, respond to different things, operate by different rules. And pretending otherwise, trying to relate to women the way you relate to men, was a guaranteed path to confusion and failure. They understood that desire isn't negotiated, that attraction isn't logical, that you can't talk a woman into wanting you by being reasonable and fair and treating her like an equal in every context. They knew that women are attracted to strength, competence, status, and the ability to protect and provide. Not because women are shallow, because those traits signal genetic fitness and resource access for offspring. It's biology wearing the mask of preference. And they knew that acting like women's stated preferences and revealed preferences are the same thing is the mistake that keeps weak men confused forever. You weren't taught any of this. You were taught that men and women are basically the same except for plumbing. That what works in your male friendships works in romantic relationships. That women want sensitivity and emotional availability above all else. Sometimes that's true, but not at the expense of strength. Never at the expense of strength. These weren't secrets. This was common knowledge. Father to son, uncle to nephew, older men to younger men. The transfer of operational data about how the world works and what it takes to navigate it successfully as a man. And then it stopped. So what happened? How did an entire generation of men lose access to knowledge that had been passed down for thousands of years? It wasn't an accident. It was systematic. Let me walk you through exactly how they broke the chain. First, they pathologized masculinity itself. Aggression became toxic. Competitiveness became problematic. Dominance became abusive. Stoicism became emotional unavailability. Ambition became greed. Confidence became arrogance. They took every trait that makes men effective in the world and relabeled it as a psychological defect that needs correction. And they did it so elegantly that most men started policing themselves, started apologizing for their own nature, started trying to become the sanitized, domesticated version of masculinity that poses no threat to anyone. Your father absorbed this, not because he was weak, because the entire culture was telling him that the old model of manhood was broken and dangerous and needed to be updated. So when it came time to teach you what his father taught him, he hesitated. Because teaching you about violence, about hierarchy, about male-female dynamics, about power, that would make you the thing society was calling toxic. He loved you too much to make you toxic. So he taught you to be nice instead, to share your feelings, to respect everyone equally, to believe that the world is fair and kindness is rewarded. He neutered the lessons because he thought he was protecting you. Second, they destroyed the spaces where men learned from other men. Your great-grandfather had male-only spaces, workshops, lodges, bars, jobs that were physically demanding and required mentorship, hunting camps, military service that wasn't optional. These weren't social clubs. They were transmission zones, places where older men tested younger men,
taught them, hardened them, showed them what was expected. Boys became men in these spaces, not automatically, through trial, through failure, through being pushed past their limits by men who'd already been pushed past theirs. All of that is gone now, or under attack. Male-only spaces are called discriminatory. Hazing is called abuse. Tough love is called toxic. Physical challenges are called unnecessary risk. And what replaced it? Nothing. Or worse than nothing, carefully moderated, supervised, liability-minimizing substitutes that teach you how to be safe, not how to be strong. Your father didn't have access to those spaces the way his father did. So even if he wanted to pass down the knowledge, he didn't have the environment that created the knowledge in the first place. Third, they made your father economically dependent and socially precarious. His father could take risks because consequences were manageable. Lose a job? Find another. Say something unpopular? So what? Your father can't. He has a mortgage, car payments, your education to fund, health insurance tied to employment, a HR department monitoring everything he says, social media that never forgets. One wrong move and he loses everything. So he learned to keep his head down, to not make waves, to be agreeable and non-threatening and politically correct.
And that version of your father, the safe, managed, economically anxious version, couldn't teach you about power. Because he'd surrendered his own to survive in a system designed to make surrender mandatory. Fourth, they replaced masculine authority with institutional authority. Your father's father was the final word in his household, not because he was a tyrant, because that's how structure worked. Someone has to have final decision-making authority or nothing functions. Your father doesn't have that. Every decision is negotiated. Every boundary is questioned. Every assertion of authority is checked by schools, therapists, social services, extended family, and a culture that treats paternal authority as inherently suspect. He can't pass down knowledge about power and hierarchy when his own position in the hierarchy has been systematically undermined. So he didn't tell you about violence because he's not allowed to model controlled aggression. He didn't tell you about hierarchy because his own authority was stripped. He didn't tell you about male-female dynamics because speaking honestly about them could cost him his marriage, his job, his reputation. The chain didn't break because men got weaker. It broke because a system that benefits from weak men deliberately severed it. So what exactly was stolen from you? What were you supposed to know by the time you became a man? Let me tell you what the rite of passage was actually for. Ancient cultures, traditional societies, they all had some version of the same thing. A moment where boys were separated from childhood, put through something difficult and dangerous, and came back as men. This wasn't hazing. This wasn't arbitrary cruelty. It was systematic knowledge transfer through experience. You were supposed to learn that you can endure more than you think, that pain is temporary, but quitting is permanent, that your body is a tool and fear is a liar. You were supposed to be pushed to your breaking point and then past it, so you'd know where your actual limits are versus where your comfort zone ends. You were supposed to fail, publicly, and learn that failure isn't death, that embarrassment is survivable, that you can be humiliated and still get up the next day and try again. You were supposed to learn that other men will test you, size you up, push you, and that the correct response isn't to appeal to fairness or authority. It's to push back, to hold your ground, to prove you're not prey. You were supposed to discover that respect isn't automatic. It's earned through demonstrated capability and willingness to face consequences. None of this happens in a classroom. None of this happens with supervision and safety protocols. It happens in the gap between guidance and protection, where boys become men because they have to. You didn't get that. You got participation trophies and safe spaces, and the message that you're perfect exactly as you are, which is a lie that leaves you completely unprepared for a world that doesn't care about your self-esteem. You were also supposed to learn about violence from men who understood it. Not how to start fights, how to end them. When to walk away and when walking away makes you a target. The difference between posturing and actual threat. How to read a room and assess danger before it escalates. You were supposed to know that the capacity for violence, properly controlled, is what allows civilization to exist. That sheep need sheepdogs. That pacifism is only possible because rough men stand ready to do violence on your behalf. And you were supposed to know that if you can't protect yourself, you can't protect anyone else, which means you'll always be the one being protected, which means you'll always be subordinate. You weren't taught this. You were taught that violence is always wrong, and there's always another way, and real men don't fight. That's what women and children get to believe because men make it true. But men don't get that luxury. You were supposed to learn about leadership and hierarchy from the bottom up, by being at the bottom, by following men more capable than you, by watching how they lead, how they make decisions, how they handle pressure and conflict and failure. And then, eventually, by being given responsibility and authority and learning what it costs to carry it. You don't learn leadership from books. You learn it by submitting to it and then exercising it. By being tested by those above you and testing those below you. But you don't have that pipeline anymore. You have horizontal peer groups where everyone's equal and nobody's in charge. And conflict is managed through consensus and feelings, which produces men who've never followed anyone who deserved to be followed, and therefore have no model for how to lead when their turn comes. And you were supposed to learn the truth about women, not from women, from men who'd already learned it the hard way. That women don't want projects, they want finished men. That desire isn't negotiated through logic and fairness. That being needed is not the same as being wanted. That attraction and comfort are inversely related past a certain point. That women will test you constantly, not because they're malicious, because they're biologically programmed to ensure you're actually as strong as you appear. And if you fail those tests by seeking reassurance or explaining yourself or getting emotional, you've proven you're not.
This knowledge used to be passed down with brutal clarity. Don't chase. Don't supplicate. Don't negotiate attraction. Don't treat courtship like a transaction where niceness buys desire. Be formidable. Be competent. Be outcome independent. Let her orbit your strength rather than orbiting her approval. You weren't taught this. You were taught to listen to women about what women want, which is like learning to hunt from deer. Here's what you need to understand. All of this wasn't an accident. The broken chain, the missing knowledge, your father's silence. They needed you not to know. A man who understands violence is hard to intimidate. A man who understands hierarchy is hard to manipulate with appeals to fairness and equality. A man who understands women is hard to control through shame and guilt about his desires. A man who understands power is dangerous. Not dangerous to society, dangerous to people who profit from your weakness. Think about it. What would happen if every young man understood that respect is earned through capability, not given for existing? That status hierarchies are real, and trying to abolish them just makes you blind to them. That strength matters more than sensitivity in the dominance games that determine your outcomes. They'd stop consuming solutions to problems that don't exist. They'd stop apologizing for their nature. They'd stop seeking permission from people who benefit from their compliance. They'd become ungovernable. The entire system we live in runs on your ignorance of these truths, on your confusion about why being nice doesn't work, on your belief that the rules are fair and following them guarantees outcomes. Your weakness isn't a bug, it's a feature. Confused men buy things. They buy courses, therapy, pills, programs that promise to fix what isn't broken. They stay in jobs they hate because they don't know they have options. They accept relationships that drain them because they think that's what love looks like. Strong men who know what they are and what they want, they're not customers, they're problems. So the knowledge had to stop being transmitted. The spaces where man became man had to be destroyed. The authority of fathers had to be undermined. The very concept of masculinity had to be pathologized. Not because it's better for man, because it's more profitable and more controllable to have weak men who don't know they're supposed to be strong. So here's where you are. Your father never told you what you needed to know, not because he failed you, because the chain was broken before it reached him. But now you know. Now you understand what was taken, what you're supposed to be, what knowledge is missing. The question is, what do you do with that? You can't go back. You can't have the traditional male upbringing that forms man properly. That pipeline is gone. But you can build it yourself, deliberately, through choosing mentors who know what you need to learn, through seeking out hard things that push you past your comfort zone, through studying the men who understand power and hierarchy and violence and leadership, through teaching yourself what your father couldn't teach you. You learn about violence by training, not to hurt people, to know you can, to have the capacity and choose restraint rather than having no capacity and calling it virtue. You learn about hierarchy by entering arenas where competence is measured objectively, where your performance speaks and your intentions don't matter, where you rank low at first and climb through demonstrated capability.
You learn about women by watching what they do, not what they say, by testing theories against reality, by accepting that you were given bad information and need to collect better data through experience. You learn about power by acquiring it, by becoming the man others want to follow, by building something that matters and defending it against people who want to take it. None of this is comfortable. All of it is necessary. Because the alternative is spending your entire life feeling like something's missing, like you're supposed to know something fundamental but don't, like you're playing a game where everyone else got the rules except you. Your father never told you about power, but now you know why. And now you know what to do about it. The chain broke, but chains can be reforged. Not the same way, not through the traditional pipeline that no longer exists, but through deliberate choice to reclaim what was stolen. Every generation of men before you knew things you don't. About violence, about hierarchy, about women, about power. They knew these things because their fathers taught them, and their fathers taught them. Back through thousands of years of unbroken transmission. That transmission ended with you. But it doesn't have to end after you. You can learn what you were supposed to know. You can become what you were supposed to be. And when you have sons or nephews or younger men who look to you, you can pass it down. You can be the link that reconnects the chain. This is what your father never told you about power. Not because he didn't love you, but because he didn't know, or couldn't say, or wasn't allowed to. But you know now. What you do with that knowledge determines whether the chain stays broken or starts to heal.